Hi Blazers, this is Mrs. Jackson here. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm going to do a couple of quick videos today to show you how to make a mask. We're going to do two different kinds of masks. One is a low-tech version and one is a higher-tech version. If you have access to a sewing machine and you like to hand sew, or maybe you want to use a Cricut machine if you have one at home. And the low-tech version will be very simple and use supplies that I'm sure all of you have on hand already. So stay tuned. What you're going to need to grab for the low-tech version is just maybe a bandana or just a simple square of fabric, maybe yay big, okay? Simple square of fabric and two elastics. Hair elastics will work, or if you have rubber bands or anything like that, anything similar to that we can use as well. So that's really all that you need for the low-tech version of a mask, and I'll show you how to do that. For the higher-tech version, we really would need to use either a sewing machine or hand sew. If you are a hand sewer, that's awesome. You're going to get a thread and needle. And then if you have a sewing machine, go ahead and set that up, load your bobbin, get your thread all loaded up and ready to go. We're going to cut a pattern. So I will actually post the pattern and have access to a link where you can find the pattern. If you have a Cricut machine, which we have in the lab, and I'm going to use a Cricut Maker for this particular tutorial, but if you have a Cricut, you can actually cut the pattern on the Cricut, which is great. So you can save some time, you can make it super accurate, very exact, and exactly what you want it to be. So what you're going to need if you're going to do the high-tech version are two different kinds of material for the inside and the outside. I'm going to use this fun, it's like an orangey, I'm not sure if you can really see it. There you go. Orangey, like peachy coral color with little black triangles. I'm going to use this for the outside of my mask. And then for the inside, or like the liner version, I'm going to use this blue and white cute chevron. So this is actually along the salvaged piece of my material, which is great because I can tell exactly what angle this is going to be cut at. So it's going to be a nice clean cut. So I'm going to use this for the inside of my mask, and I'm going to use this fun bright color for the outside of my mask. And the reason we have an inside and an outside is so that you can slide a filter in between. That'll allow you to use your mask more frequently, more often. As far as filters go, at least what I've been reading online and what professionals have found so far is you can use either a coffee filter, a air conditioning filter, or something along those lines. If you happen to have access to a medical mask, a N95 mask or something like that, you can also use that in between the mask that we're going to make out of this material, and that will allow your mask to be used a few more times than you would normally use it. So you're going to make an inner and an outer and then be able to slide something in between. So you're going to need those two pieces of material. You're also going to need access to needle and thread and or sewing machine and or a Cricut. The other thing that I would suggest that you use is a nice pair of fabric scissors. So you can ask your grown-up, your adult, or maybe if you are the seamstress in the house, you may have access to fabric scissors. Fabric scissors cut really easily and really clean. These are also things that you don't want to use on paper. So if you have a pair of fabric scissors, protect them. Make sure that they're only used to cut fabric. Okay, so let me cut, and I'm going to show you the next step in the process. Okay, so to start our low-tech version, of our mask, you're just going to get a square of fabric, and it can be any fabric that you happen to have in your house. The CDC is suggesting that we use a tightly woven cotton fabric. So with that in mind, a bandana or something of that sort is perfectly fine for that. We actually have HB bandanas that you may have gotten last year at International Women's Day. So what we're going to do is take our bandana and we're going to fold it in thirds, just like so. So you have it folded in thirds. Perfect. And then you're going to take 2 elastics. I like using hosiery elastics because they're kind of soft. So when you put it around your ear, they won't pull quite as hard or quite as strong as a regular elastic for your hair. So what you're going to do is you take your bandana and you put your elastic roughly, I'd say about 1/3 of the way in on each side of your bandana. And then you're going to fold it over right where the elastic meets. And you'll create a little pocket here. Okay, so now that you've kind of formed your low-tech version of a bandana, I'm going to show you how you can put that one on. So this is the perfect solution if you just need to run out really quickly. You don't need a solution that's going to last a long time, right, that you're going to use over and over again. That may be more the high-tech version, but this one right here will work perfectly for something quick, a quick fix. Okay, I'm actually going to take my glasses off for this because I need to put things around my ear. So you're going to take your bandana that you have then folded in around your elastics. The parts that are folded in are going to be the parts that are going to face your face, okay? So you're going to put that up to your face and then stretch your elastics to fit around your ear. Great, so clearly I couldn't talk with that on, but this is a great way if you just need to grab things that are around your house to be able to stay safe and be able to stay protected during COVID-19, okay? So this is our low-tech version. So if you are eager to now try the next step, okay, you're ready to start sewing, to start making and creating something more permanent. Maybe you want to make some masks that then you can donate and give to other people, which would be a great way to help serve our community at this time. Let me now show you a higher tech way of making a COVID-19 mask. Okay, so if you have access to a Cricut machine, then you are actually going to go to your Cricut design space, which is here. You go to your Cricut design space and there are actually quite a few masks under access that you will have the ability to then use to download. So this is the simplified youth mask. Maybe if you have a Cricut Explorer or something that is not necessarily set up to cut fabric, you can cut a pattern out of cardstock or out of paper and then cut around that for your fabric. There's also a child face mask here or an adult face mask with a little bit of a different pattern that you could use. I've seen a lot of these around too. So you can use something like that. This one here is a no-sew face mask that you can try. I haven't tried that one yet, so that could be cool. If you happen to do any of these, I would love to see them. So maybe you can take a picture and send it to me, and I can then help to spread that on our HB site here on our Instagram. So this is actually the pattern that I have been using. There are tons of sizes. So you have a small youth, a small, medium adult, and a large. And then you have the same things for a Explorer. So again, if you have a Cricut Explorer, you're going to use these patterns and cut cardstock and then cut around the fabric for your particular piece. I'm going to do a youth face mask here for a Cricut Maker. So once you click on it and you select Make It, you're going to then get this option. I'm just going to make one copy of our project for now. I'm not going to mark the fabric. You can, if you have a fabric marking pen and you know how to load that into your Cricut Maker, you can go ahead and select that. I'm actually going to deselect that because I don't need it right now. And as you see, we actually have 3 Cricut mats that are loaded up for this particular pattern. So the first mat, which is what you see right here, are the 2 interior pieces. So these are going to be the 2 blue and white chevron patterns that we're going to make that are going to go on the inside of our mask. The next 2 mats here, 2 and 3, are both the outside of the mask. So in our particular pattern, that's going to be the orangey, corally color with the black triangles, okay? So we are going to start with the inside of the mask. So if you take a look at the dimensions here, that's what you're going to want to make sure that you pay attention to as you lay your fabric down on your mat, okay? So after I have selected, it looks good to me, we're going to select continue. And then I will show you the next step. Our material is cotton. Yes, if for some reason you're using a different kind of material, you can go ahead and select that here too. So again, like I said before, if you don't have a maker and you're using an Explore and you want to use cardstock or something like that, that's where you would select that here. If you're using a maker and you can cut fabric directly, then you can use something like felt, cotton. If you have faux leather, go for it, get fancy. We're going to choose cotton because that's what we're using. You can select the pressure here. If it's a thicker cotton, you can choose more. If it's something very thin, you can choose less. Default is usually the way to go, right? You can't really go wrong. And then I'll show you the next step from the actual machine. Okay, so before we get ready to actually cut on the maker, we will need to set up our actual mat. So I am going to actually use a different cut of material because I wanted to make sure that it was the right size. We're going to use the same blue and white chevron. I'm using a mat that I have used clearly a lot of times. You can kind of see some of the fabric residue and stuff on it. That's a well-loved Cricut mat. So we're going to put our fabric, and I'll show you this as soon as I have it laid out, right onto the Cricut mat here. If for some reason your fabric mat is not super sticky, kind of like mine is starting to be just because I use it a lot, and you happen to have like a little bit of tape, go ahead and tape the edges down. That's perfectly fine too. Okay, so we're going to get that ready to go, and then I will show you how we're going to load it into the Cricut. Alright, so my Cricut Maker is actually ready to go and cut this piece. And you can tell that because the load button is blinking. So I have the mat all ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and put it into the grooves of the Maker. And I'm going to select load. It's going to load it up, and this is when it's starting to get the material ready to roll. I'm going to just smooth it out because my mat has seen better days. I'm going to then hit the blinking Cricut sign. That is telling me that the machine is ready to cut. So let's go ahead and watch it cut. So what we have on our Cricut Maker is a rotary fabric cutting blade, and you can kind of see how it is doing its magic right now. So if you are going to use a Cricut machine, make sure that you have a rotary blade in order to cut fabric. There's tons of blades that you can use on a Cricut. The rotary is an awesome one to get, and one that I would suggest that if you're going to invest in this machine, that you grab one of these to be able to do some really cool projects with. So it's pretty quick, it's very exact, and exactly what we need for a pattern. And that is really it. It's already cut the inside of our pattern for our mask. And you can tell it's then done because the load/unload button is blinking again. So when we push that button, it's going to push out the mat, and then we can then do the cool part, which is peel off the excess fabric. And now we have what we need for our mask. Okay, so now that we're all cut, and you can tell that we're done because the unload/load button on the Maker is blinking, and we have unloaded our mat, then you should be able to pull off the excess material. Let's move the mat out of the way, and you'll be left with the two sides of the inside of our fabric. Now, if you're cutting your pattern from scratch and you're not using the Maker, which I will have attached to this presentation, then you want to make sure that you're cutting mirror images of the pattern, especially if you have a pattern that's not a solid color, or maybe that's not the same on the front as it is on the back. So you want to cut a mirror image so that when we sew them together and then we open them up, it gives us a nice clean print. Okay, so now that we've cut the inside, I'm going to go ahead and cut the outside, and then I'll show you how we put them all together. Okay, so now that we've cut the last piece of the outside of our fabric, let's go ahead and move that out of the way. Let's take a look at our pieces. So again, we're cutting 2 mirror images, okay? So these are the outside. Again, this is what you want to do if you have fabric that's not the same on both sides. But I want to take a look at the difference between the outside of our mask and the inside. So it's pretty much the same exact pattern, except the outside is slightly larger. And that's to account for the seam allowance that we're going to make in order to then insert our elastic or our hair ties or whatever it is that you choose to use to keep your mask on. Okay, so now that we have our 4 pieces, we're going to start sewing. So if you're a hand sewer, go ahead and thread your needle. If you are going to sew with a machine, go ahead and pull your machine out. I'm going to pull mine out. Okay, so next we're going to start sewing. I am going to start with my inside piece, and I'm going to start sewing along this line here. I'm going to sew along this line here, and I'm also going to sew the 2 outside seams here to create a little pocket, okay? And again, I'll have these instructions attached too, so that if it's easier for you to read along, you can go ahead and do that. But go ahead and sew here. So again, if you're using a sewing machine, you want to have everything threaded up and loaded. If you're hand sewing, you're just going to sew along this curved line here. Okay, so I always do a back stitch just to make sure that everything is nice and secure. You unload it, and this is how your piece should look, okay? The next thing I'm going to do is go to the end here, to these pieces here, and I'm going to sew them open to create a little seam. Best practice is probably to go ahead and press this, but I'm not going to do that for the purpose of this video. So I'm just going to sew these open. I'll put on the video like the seam allowance, which is about 1/4 of an inch. If you're interested in that, if you happen to be a seamstress, then you're going to want to know that. So I went ahead and sewed that open, just a quick line. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Lock that in, and so here's what you're going to have now. You're going to have this curved piece that is sewn, and then you move to the other end, and both sides will have a little seam that's sewn here. So that is the outside. Now I'm going to move, the inside. Sorry, that is the inside. Now I'm going to move to the outside, which is a pretty coral piece. And you don't have to do 2 separate colors. I meant to say that earlier. I do 2 separate colors so that I know what is what, because when you're doing a lot of these, sometimes it gets a little confusing. So if I know all of my outsides are bright and my insides are not, then I can kind of keep track. So when you're sewing your outside, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to start by sewing along the curve here. Okay, so I sewed along the curve right here. And now, a little bit different than the seam on the inside piece is for the outside piece, I am going to turn it in. So you have a little bit of a seam here. And then I'm going to turn it over again. So it almost doubles the seam, just to make it pretty. You don't have to do that. You can just sew a straight seam, but, you know, might as well get fancy with it. you're done, it's nice and pretty like that. This is the part that your elastic or your tie or whatever you choose to use is going to go through. So I like to make that a little bit more durable just to make sure that as you're pulling and stretching, it's nice and secure. So we're going to do the same thing for the other side. You're going to fold it over, just a smidget, right? And then fold it over. Let me do it this way. Fold it over just a little bit, and then you're going to fold it over again. So you're almost making like a little loop. And you're going to sew that part shut. Perfect. Okay, so now we have our inside piece with a little seam here. So when we open it up, look how pretty. Nice. We have our outside piece. I went ahead and put a top stitch just right here just to keep it secure. You don't have to do that, but that's what I did. And then we have our looped seam here for our elastics to go through. A couple other tools that I use that if you're a seamstress you probably have is a rotary cutter. This comes in handy when you're cutting fabric. And then I have just little snippers. So when I have little pieces of thread that are hanging out or anything like that that I want to get rid of, just give you a quick snip. Regular scissors also work for this. Okay, so now we're going to pair them up. So in this part, we're going to line it up and get ready to sew it shut. So the rule for this is you're going to have your insides match and your outsides poke out. Okay, so your insides are the nice finished pieces. So again, I went ahead and put a little top stitch on here. You don't have to do that. But your inside piece and your finished piece here are going to match. And then your outside pieces, a quick way to check this to make sure that it's right is that this seam, this extra piece here, is going to be showing on one side, and then the extra piece here is going to be showing on the other side, okay? So you're going to have your finished pieces touching and then your unfinished pieces on the outsides like this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew the tops, so the curved parts here, and then the bottom together. And then what we're going to do is pull it inside out. Okay? So let me show you how we're going to do that. Okay, so we have finished with the sewing part, and we are ready for the grand reveal. So if you have used your sewing machine, go ahead and push that to the side. You can actually turn that off, save a little energy. If you have done some hand sewing, go ahead and finish that stitch off, and this is the fun part. This is the part that I give my 7-year-old daughter Parker to do. We are going to pull it through and do the grand reveal of how our mask looks. So you're going to pull it through, whatever you need to do, stick your hand in there if you need a little help. Pencil eraser works very well for pulling things through as well. All right, so we're going to fluff it out. Make it look good. One thing you can do too at this point is to get just a low iron and press it and make sure that everything is nice and smooth. And once you do that, and if you're like me, stray little strings drive you nuts. So I'm going to cut those off. And then, voila, you have a face mask. Okay, so you have a face mask with 2 different patterns. Again, you don't have to use 2 different materials that can then use a filter that can be used over and over again. It can also be washed. I would suggest that if you wash it, just to lay it flat to dry. Don't put it in the dryer. And you can continue to keep yourself and your family safe throughout this time. So if you happen to make one of these, which I hope that you do, whether it's the low-tech version or the higher-tech version, I would love for you to take a picture or a video or something like that and send it to me so that we can showcase your work. I really enjoyed making these. I enjoy sewing and creating, and I hope that you do too. And in this time, it's really important for us to be able to express ourselves creatively. So if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear them. If you have any questions, I would love to answer them as best I can. During this presentation, I'm going to be available for any questions, so feel free to ask away. And anytime after that too, if anything comes up, you're in the middle of a mask, you forget a step, you need help, please feel free to reach out to me, ljackson@hb.edu, and I will answer as quickly and completely as I can. I look forward to seeing pictures and videos of your masks and of all of your creations, really. And I hope that in this time you're continuing to create and make and design and express yourself creatively. Okay, so thanks so much for watching. I hope that you were able to grab some information that you can then use from this presentation, and happy making.